This is news to 6 a.m. on News Power Digital for Tuesday, 19th November. Good morning. Government has expressed confidence in the 5 names nominated to become members of the Police Service Commission as offered by the President. Those nominated are Wendell Wallace, Anika Fritz Brown, Ethel Hector Barkley, Roger Babaram, and Ian Kevin Ramdani. On November 15th, the term of the former commission members, retired Judge Judith Jones, Maxine Atong, Maxine King, Rajiv Prasad, and Ian Ramdani expired. The qualifications of the nominees were presented in the Parliament by Minister of National Security Fitzgerald Hines, who indicated government had supported the nominees for the PSA as presented by Her Excellency the President. Prime Minister Dr. Keith Rowley says government will not bow to special interest pressure to devalue the Trinidad and Tobago dollar. Speaking on the Forex issue for the first time in the Parliament yesterday, the Prime Minister said the pressure to devalue was coming from people who largely have Forex reserves. He said devaluation would increase cost and make those with foreign exchange wealthier. Dr. Rowley said the move could have serious implications for the population. It was revealed that 2.5 billion US dollars is injected by the government into the local economy every year. The government admits there has been an increase in demand for Forex due to growth in the economy, a preference for outside goods, and online buying. Talks are being held with stakeholders by the finance minister to find out from commercial banks and businesses how they feel of the issue. The Minister of Finance has already met with the 4 largest commercial banks, and the Prime Minister revealed the importance of these deliberations. The final audit report on personnel, equipment, and processes at the Strategic Services Agency, the SSA, has not yet been completed. Several interim reports on the SSA have been submitted to the government. The SSA continues to investigate the matter. Parliament was told when the process is over, the final report will be submitted to the government by the head of the SSA, Brigadier General, retired Anthony Philip Spencer. Prime Minister Dr. Keith Rowley said policy will be guided by information collected. It was revealed several employees of the SSA were terminated for several reasons during the course. The Parliament is told of the proposed composition of the vetting unit of the Trinidad and Tobago Police Service. Recently, there was signing of an MOU between government of the United States Drug Enforcement Agency and the DEA to set up this unit. Prime Minister Dr. Keith Rowley explained the unit will be made up of persons from law enforcement entities with authority to probe major transnational crime. Over the past year, appropriate consultations were held in this matter, according to Prime Minister Dr. Keith Rowley. The unit will report directly to the Commissioner of Police. The government continues to seek help from various bodies in a bid to find the owner or owners of the tugboat Solo Creed in Angola, which was involved in an oil spill in Tobago, which took place in February this year and caused some significant environmental damage. The House of Representatives were informed of the vessel and those associated with it were operating illegally. Prime Minister Dr. Keith Rowley said efforts continue to find those responsible for the situation, and the International Oil Pollution Compensation Fund is working with the government in terms of offering assistance and finalizing financial redress for those affected. Dr. Rowley said the government must be able to show what is done and find out who was responsible for the incident. The Attorney General is seeking legal advice with respect to the report of the Commission of Inquiry into the attempted 1990 coup and will advise the Cabinet before the exercise is completed. Prime Minister Dr. Keith Rowley revealed this during question and answer period in the House of Representatives yesterday. The Seamen and Waterfront Workers Trade Union said it will fight for the 12% wage increase it claims it's rightfully theirs and for an improved, efficient, and productive and sustainable Port of Spain. Port workers have been engaging in protest action in recent months or weeks. The SWWTU says it's a competitive and efficient port can only be achieved through immediate implementation of the framework agreement and the international best practices it claims legitimately negotiated with the Port Authority in Trinidad and Tobago in 2015. However, on Parliament on Friday, it was told by the Works and Transport Minister, legal advice informed the SWWTU and the Port Authority. The MOU of the Memorandum of Understanding is not enforceable, but the union has refused to submit an offer and both sides are yet to reach a settlement on this matter. Police officers shot and killed one suspect and wounded another and arrested a third after an attempted robbery of a water delivery truck on around West Main Road yesterday. Police reports said around 1 p.m., drama began to unfold after a delivery truck from Blue Waters parked the truck along the main road in Arangways. Two men, one armed, jumped into the truck and attempted to rob them. The driver of the delivery truck began to struggle with the two suspects. Officers of the Interagency Task Force who were patrolling nearby heard the commotion and ran to the scene. One officer saw the suspect running south along Arangways main road and called on them to stop. However, one of them opened fire on the officer, who shot back. More officers in a marked police vehicle responded. Police said the silver AD wagon pulled up alongside and the suspects as they were running away, and they got inside. Police officers continued pursuing the suspects and managed to intercept the vehicle they were traveling in. There was an exchange of gunfire between officers and one of the suspects, resulting in one of the suspects being fatally shot by police. The two other suspects exited the vehicle and fled. However, their escape was short-lived. They were eventually captured. One of them was shot and injured. The dead suspect is yet to be identified, and investigations are continuing. In news of the region, Jamaican Tourism Minister Edmund Bartlett continued talks on Monday, which started on Sunday, with the entire ownership structure of the country's tourism industry. He was speaking with reporters on the sidelines of a reception ceremony for the inaugural Bahama Air flight at the Sangster International Airport in Jamaica on Sunday. Early Monday morning, workers at Excellence Oyster Bay in Trilwani took to the streets to demand increased wages, including overtime pay, additional staff bonuses, and more uniforms from employers. It's the fourth protest in the past week. And finally, a top German court ruled on Monday that Facebook users whose data was illegally accessed and distributed online can claim compensation in a landmark decision, potentially affecting thousands of other cases. The Federal Court of Justice decided even after a brief loss of control over one's data can amount to damage, and financial losses do not need to be proven. The ruling of the test case could have a bearing on thousands of other cases currently before the German courts. And that is news to 6 a.m. right here on News Power Digital. We'll have major news coming your way at 7 a.m. Good Tuesday morning to you. Good Tuesday morning, everyone. Good Tuesday morning. As Steve would say, good Tuesday morning. Rise and shine. It's Tuesday, the 19th of November, 2024. Yes, I'm Paul, running solo for a bit. Steve is dealing with a bit of an emergency, so he'll be joining us a bit late this morning. Hope you're having a great morning so far, and you are bright-eyed and bushy-tailed. Let's say good morning to some of you who have already checked in. Good morning to Garth Cillier out of Baltimore. David Wares, good morning. Boye Bedassi from Debe, good morning to you and everyone in Debe. Good morning to Oliver Manwaring. Wayne Bennett from Covington, Georgia. Good morning to Wendy Ann James, Ewart Rajpaul, Rena Jennings, Ian Nawalu Lee, Rainer Hulasi, Trinidad Mago, Riri, Rennie Devines, Bisnath Prasad, Chris Toussaint, I think in Washington, D.C. Grand rising to you also. And good morning to Alan Reese and the Slick Money Grip. Good Tuesday morning to you. I hope you're having a good morning so far. It is Tuesday the 19th. Is this the day we played football several years ago? Is it 1989? I think it's 1989 when in that ill-fated match against the United States. Good morning to Sherwin Kerr, who's just stuck in. Yes, I think it's November 19th we played that match, if I'm not mistaken. And lost to a team you shouldn't have lost to after much speculation and consternation. Many comments on that match and many conspiracy theories also. Good morning, Lincoln. Good morning to, yes, it's 89. Yes, I thought it was 89. That's the year before the attempted coup. And I snuck into that match just in time to see the lone goal being scored on the Trinidad and Tobago team, kicking us out of the World Cup. We eventually made the World Cup in 2006 or 2007, thereabouts. But we had a right to go to the World Cup that year because the USA at that time was one of the, if not the weakest team in the World Cup cadre of teams vying to head to. I can't remember where the World Cup was held that year, but anyway, it was a long, disgusting match, and the end results show that we actually lost the match. So, to one of the weakest teams in the thing, a great lesson for us in Trinidad and Tobago about players and long bus rides, etc., etc. There were many conspiracy theories about who benefited from us losing and who did not benefit from us losing. And Deborah says she still has her tickets to get in. Or you didn't get in? Well, I was snuck in by Alvin Cornell. And as I got up into the commentary booth, saw the goal scored. Yeah, there were thousands of people who didn't get in because the match was oversold. And there were theories about that, who benefited from those funds also way back then. So confusion happening a long time in Trinidad and Tobago, but we're kind of known for that. What you will do. Anyway, good morning, Trinidad and Tobago. As I said before, for those of you just sneaking in, Steve is dealing with a bit of an emergency in the office, so he'll be joining us a bit late this morning. So what happened in the country? The Prime Minister, there was a sitting of Parliament in the House of Representatives yesterday, and the Prime Minister spoke on the Forex issue, which is one of the big issues being discussed in the country for obvious reasons, for many different reasons, obvious reasons, including the small man, in parentheses, and small and medium-sized businesses having great difficulty putting their hands on Forex. The Prime Minister indicated the government pumps $2.5 billion US dollars into the system every year to keep up with Forex demands and to stabilize the system so that the dollar does not change value when compared to the US dollar. In the interest of the government, stating their policy position is that they will not devalue the dollar. And the Prime Minister indicated yesterday in the Parliament that there are special interest individuals and groups who have been lobbying to have the TNT dollar devalued, or at least have the parameters within which the dollar is floating, because it goes between, depending on what day of the week and how much demand I guess there is, about 6 points. I think the official thing is 6.7 or 6.9, but we know that you pay a lot more than that for Forex on the market in Trinidad and Tobago. I think if you go to the Cambio in the airport, it can go as much as 7.8 or 7.9 TT dollars to a US dollar. So, and on the black market, it's much more than that. So, the Prime Minister said the government will not bow to special interest pressure and devalue the TNT dollar. He said the pressure was coming from people who largely have Forex reserved stuck away. So, of course, if the dollar is devalued, they can sell that and make a lot of money. This is the assertion coming from the Prime Minister. He said the devaluation would increase costs and make those with Forex reserves wealthier. He said that move, which is devaluing the TNT dollar, could have serious implications for the population. And of course, the government continued to pump a lot of money into the system through the central bank to keep the dollar at that general rate, exchange rate. The Prime Minister indicated that there was an increased demand for Forex due to growth in the economy. But obviously the economy had contracted after COVID, and it did. But was there a lot of Forex demand before COVID also? Anyway, he also said there's a preference for outside goods and online buying. The finance minister said to be talking with the major commercial banks. One of these newspapers is reporting that he's already had meetings with the four largest commercial banks. I'm presuming those are Republic, First Citizens, Scotia, and Royal Bank. I guess those will be the largest commercial banks in the country. And we will see how it evolves. I don't see any changes to the situation coming in the near future, quite frankly, because we're going into Christmas and Carnival, which are extremely high demand times for US dollars in this country. As a matter of fact, US Thanksgiving is coming up. When is it? Next week? When is Thanksgiving? Somebody let me know in the chat, please. And people fly to the US for Thanksgiving. Their Black Friday sales coming up all across the US. People are traveling to the US to be with their families for Thanksgiving, and certainly for Christmas coming up. People buy a lot more during Christmas time. They buy presents online. I'm sure the online shopping is already increasing steadily heading to Christmas and Thanksgiving. And we will see next Thursday is Thanksgiving. So there's a lot of increased buying heading up to Thanksgiving, and a lot of sales after Thanksgiving online through Amazon and other portals, Temu and Shein and all these sites. So at the end of the day, heading to the end of the year, there's going to be significantly increased demand for Forex, and it will put more strain on the system. In addition to individuals, private citizens buying more stuff online, merchants will be paying more. People have goods and services, well, goods on the port, which is a whole different discussion. My theory is it's not a theory. Every year just have this back on the port. And I think a lot of it is contrived to create a situation or a circumstance where people feel the need. Some people feel the need to pass money to get the thing clear. Allegedly. Well, no, not allegedly. It happens. I dare somebody to challenge me. Of course, they will say provide proof. Nobody ain't going to admit, well, yes, I just passed money to get my things expedited on the port, because then they'll be guilty of breaking the law themselves. So nobody ain't going to admit to that. But come on, we're down here a long time, we know. Anyway, and after Christmas, the Forex demand will continue to increase heading into Carnival. So no end in sight soon for the increased Forex demand. We've had multiple long discussions on this over the last couple of months in Trinidad and Tobago, particularly on this, in addition to on this show, where we discussed the issue of cars, which ended up on the front page of the Guardian over the weekend. I am of the belief that there can be some management of the importation of new cars, and the word is management. As some people said in the chat last week, I didn't say cut it out, because that would be a ridiculous proposition in terms of car companies and their businesses and the people they employ. But they can certainly manage it. I don't think we need to be importing, is it 12,000 cars a year? I think 12,000 cars a year is what the newspaper article said, particularly with the congestion on the road. One of the reports over the weekend indicated there are about 1.2 to 1.4 million cars, because we keep piling cars in the system and we don't really deregister cars. Add that to the minor issue of the foreign use cars, because they are also adding to the number of cars on the road. So we'll see. We'll see how it goes. That's one of the ways. I also think that we can manage the amount of foreign goods coming into the country. It is a free market system, yes. And merchants have the right to negotiate to bring what they feel is in demand in the country. And some people suggest that, well, they wouldn't be bringing it if there wasn't a demand for it. Well, I have a different theory to that. A lot of this stuff is not necessary. A lot of this stuff is unhealthy. A lot of this stuff competes with local farmers and local producers. And without cutting it out, they could certainly manage it by increasing the taxes on some of that stuff being imported, particularly the stuff with and other jurisdictions have done it, that are high in sugar and not good for children who have diabetes and adults who have diabetes. So, like, for example, in the US, they've passed laws that have higher tax tariffs on stuff that are high in sugar and stuff that's unhealthy for you. We could do that, and if people wanted, they pay more for it, and merchants pay more to bring it in, and we'll pass the additional cost on to consumers as a deterrent to people buying that stuff or people importing that stuff, and focus more on local produce and local manufacturers, which in many cases are doing great stuff, So, and yes, David, Forex is being, in my opinion, piled away by some people. That's why the Prime Minister spoke about people who have Forex reserves. If businessmen think that Trinidad and Tobago is, I don't want to use the word unstable, but tenuous business-wise for many different reasons, what they do is pile away money into foreign accounts. And a lot of them have been doing so for several years, adding another source of drain to the Forex situation in the country. So all that is adding to it. And yes, Chris too said, the food that's being imported into the US, a lot of it is not good, it's not healthy at all. It's extremely unhealthy. And adding to our health woes, which are adding to our health costs, which are adding to our costs in the Ministry of Health. So it's a vicious cycle that continues, And while the local manufacturers have to compete with these goods, which in many cases, for example, US corn, which is being imported, is heavily subsidized in the US. So they send it to jurisdictions like Trinidad and Tobago and make money from it, while our local producers are suffering. Good morning, Ragoobarsingh.
Hi, good morning, guys, and good morning to our listeners and viewers, wherever you are.
You saved me from talking to myself for the last 20 minutes.
Oh, what happened to Steve Khan?
He's dealing with a bit of emergency in the office.
Oh, okay.
You also, I spoke for 22 minutes by myself.
What kind of emergency?
I'm not allowed to say. It was a bit of a fire, a minor fire at one of the installation plants. So
that sounds serious.
Well, it's a standby generator that got a little blaze, so they're dealing with it. So Steve had to go up to one of the transmission site. And he and good morning, Glenn Howard, up there dealing with it. The fire is extinguished, but of course they have other equipment that they have to deal with, So thank you for joining me this morning at this time, so I have someone to talk to now.
Okay, you're welcome.
I have someone to argue with. Yeah, I was talking about the Prime Minister's comments about the Forex issue in the country, and he's saying the government will not bow to quote-unquote special interest pressure to devalue the TNT dollar. He said the calls were largely coming from people who have Forex reserves or stocks, and a devaluation will increase cost and make those with Forex stocks wealthier. And the move could have serious implications for the local economy, and that the government pumps $2.5 billion US into the system every year. Yes, Avril, you'll be able to do news. We just have no news bed. Hopefully, Steve will be back by then. You'll read the news without any clips if Steve is not back by 7 a.m. Just as I read the news by myself at 6, and it's good to have you back also, because I need you to know that.
And he said $7 billion $7 billion in foreign currency goes into the system every year since 2014. I think is what he said, and he said the amount has not changed. People seem to think that there's been a reduction in the foreign exchange allocation. And now, of course, between 2014, if that's what I read this morning, between 2014 to 2024, that's 10 years. Of course, things change in 10 years, which they did. And he attributed a lot of the increase in our foreign exchange demand to our consumption, especially online shopping, etc., etc. So that 7 billion is obviously no longer enough within the current climate for whatever reason. So he says it's 2.5 billion that the government puts into the system, and the commercial banking system puts in 4.5.
Oh, okay. So it's actually quite a lot more.
Yeah, 4.5 from their, well, however they get their payments and stuff from their clients and stuff, their foreign exchange earning clients. So he said it comes up to roughly 7 billion.
Yeah, that's quite a bit. And if we're eating up 7.5 billion.
7 billion.
7 billion.
And 2.5.
Every month? That's every month, right?
No, annually.
Oh, annually, okay.
Yeah.
$7 billion, $7 billion US dollars every year. You think that's a lot?
You see, because Trinidad, it's a lot. I think if you're just looking at the figures on paper, But I think because we have so much industrialization, which is what we would have spoken to with Valmiki when we spoke with him, and the demand of that sector, and our industrialized sector is pretty huge, including the manufacturing sector,
which pays US for their inputs.
US for their inputs. Of course, they may be inputting, and of course the export sector is doing pretty well in comparison to the energy sector.
It's growing. It's growing. The non-energy manufacturing sector is growing and export is growing.
So it's but I suppose a lot of the demand is there in that industrialization beyond the other things, the other consumables.
Well, remember we have foreign debt to pay off in US also.
We also have that too.
You know, we have the consumables.
So
we have the inputs, and I think there's some level of capital flight in terms of people piling away US, because if businessmen think, because I know 2 businessmen who have said over the last 10 years, because of the way Trinidad and Tobago is going, they kind of put aside a nest egg outside, you understand? In case here becomes unstable, to take care of their families. So, and those are 2 relatively small businessmen who have foreign US accounts, who try and put a lot of money into those as much as they can, when they can, you understand? In case anything happens here, so that they have some sort of nest egg to fall back on outside. And I'm sure if they're thinking that way, other businessmen who can afford to do so, who have access to US, are doing so also.
Yeah, and we also have to remember that costs went up too, because the Prime Minister is quoted as saying since 2014, the amount has not dipped, so there's no reduction in the actual figure. But remember, during COVID, there were a lot of logistical issues across the planet, and a lot of costs went up across the planet.
Cost of shipping went up.
Yeah, which would have to be paid in foreign currency.
Well, it came back down, but it didn't pass on to the consumer.
Yeah, but I don't know. I don't know if it ever came back down.
Yeah, they said many of the experts said it stabilized and reduced a bit.
Yeah, but I don't know if it came back down to the prices in 2019.
I don't know. That I don't know.
Yeah, so because 2019 would be the last pre-COVID year, and obviously all of that factors into the demand on the foreign exchange, because we see the prices when we go to the groceries. We see that goods go up, and a lot of it is foreign, but even some of the local goods have gone up, and because I suppose of that input requirement sometimes that they would have from that foreign exchange access that they need and whatever input that they have. So I suppose it's all of that. It's a kind of complex picture, I guess.
It's a very complex picture
in terms of how it's utilized across Trinidad and Tobago.
I'm trying to remember.
I suppose other news, the property tax has been extended to December 31st. For people who have not yet paid their property tax, you now have until December 31st to pay it without any penalties involved. And that's really also because there is a tax amnesty, I think, from October to December 31st, for any sort of taxes, income tax, corporation tax. So by extension, property tax, you have an amnesty until December 31st to do whatever you require the amnesty for, I guess.
I've where I put videos of this exchange of gunfire between police and bandits in Arangways. A video of that.
Oh, from the Blue Water van?
But I can't remember where I put it. You were brain and working too well this morning.
I wouldn't have any comment on that. But but the property, yeah. So those of you who still have not paid your property tax, you have until December 31st. It was until December 20th, but the Minister of Finance clarified yesterday that it will go until December 31st because it will become part of that general amnesty on all taxes until December 31st. And the state is hoping to collect 1.5 billion, I think, from the amnesty, in separate and apart from the property tax and stuff. You can also now pay a property tax, apparently, on First Citizens and Republic Bank. You can pay a property tax online via those 2 banks, at least. beyond being able to pay via links and stuff in all of the revenue offices that you can go to pay your tax. So that's some information that might be helpful to people out there. So if you're a Republic Bank customer and if you're a First Citizens customer, you can pay your property tax via those banks. So you don't have to go to any of the revenue offices. And there was an issue because the bank, what the minister talked about yesterday is that some banks, you incur a payment when you do an online transfer in terms of the payment of a bill. There's a payment attached.
Yeah.
And the state is paying that payment for the first 6 months. And after that, well, basically taxpayers will have to pay whatever that payment is. And this is in respect of general tax, because I think you can also pay taxes online too. So you don't actually have to go to revenue offices and stuff because you can file your taxes online.
Did Minister Imber indicate if all the notices had been distributed to persons who are eligible for residential property tax?
No, I don't know. I don't know if he did. In the article that I read, it did not address that issue. It was more looking at the extension and the online paying routes that you have at this point with regard to property tax, which is for citizens and Republic.
They'd gone through just over a half of those eligible when we spoke to Brian Manning last time.
Yeah.
So, and they would have reported netting about $91 million out of those who would have been compliant. So,
yeah,
I guess they continue to send out their notices and also do assessments, you know. So
you also have that PSA. You also have the issue with that WASA judgment. I don't know how much we discussed it in detail.
No, we haven't discussed it at all.
Right. So there was a WASA judgment given by, I think, Justice Nadia Kangaloo. Which kind of was very scathing about WASA.
Very embarrassing.
And saying that there was obviously some level of misconduct, and people may want it to be contextualized. If you would allow me to contextualize it a little bit,
please do.
What the issue is, because the PSA is now saying that heads must roll with regard to the issue, with regard to what was said in that judgment. But if I could just read a little bit of it. So the Public Services Association is calling for a police investigation following a judgment against WASA delivered by High Court Judge Nadia Kangaloo last Thursday. The judge found that there was credible evidence of misconduct as well as an apparent attempt to pervert the course of justice in an investigation against an employee. So here's the actual incident, what took place. The Freedom of Information case was brought by WASA employee Lancelot Lezama, who claimed in his affidavit that there was a conspiracy to pervert the course of justice in the probe involving an allegation made by Public Utilities Minister Marvin Gonzalez against WASA employee Cecil Matthews, who was accused of allowing a non-WASA employee to drive a WASA vehicle. It was alleged that Minister Gonzalez was an eyewitness to the breach of the Cecil Matthews allegedly allowing a non-WASA employee to drive a WASA vehicle. So Lezama was tasked with the investigation of that allegation and that incident. Lezama, however, found no evidence of wrongdoing in his investigation and claimed that senior WASA officials had tried to pressure and intimidate him into reaching a finding against Matthews in what appeared to be a conspiracy designed to manipulate the investigation to justify a predetermined conclusion in support of the allegation made by the Honorable Minister. Lezama sought certain documents, including the minutes of a meeting held with then Executive Director Dr. Lennox Seeley and certain other correspondence under the Freedom of Information Act. After WASA denied his requests, Lezama challenged WASA's decision through his attorneys led by former Attorney General Annan Reblogan, Senior Counsel. Delivering her judgment last Thursday, Justice Kangaloo ordered WASA to supply the documents requested after she found that based on the submissions of Lezama as well as WASA, there was a satisfactory argument that there is reasonable evidence of misconduct in relation to public funds, particularly since the claimant, Lezama, alleges two particular matters: misbehavior and unlawful conduct by past officials, including pressure to manipulate an investigation which the claimant undertook. Reacting to the judgment in a media release yesterday, the PSA said it was extremely pleased with Justice Kangaloo's judgment against WASA in the Freedom of Information case brought by Lezama over a baseless and malicious allegation made by Gonzalez against a dedicated and hardworking employee. The union praised Lezama for his uncompromising integrity and fearless independence in conducting his investigation into the matter. The PSA and the employee resisted several attempts by senior WASA executives to unduly influence him to change his investigative report to that, so that Minister Gonzalez would not look bad and have his way. The matter illustrates the level of corruption at the highest level in WASA, laced with political interference, as there was a clear conspiracy to manipulate the investigation and pervert the course of justice. The release added. So this is the
That's a very damning indictment, huh?
This is the union's perspective of it. So
it's a very, very damning indictment on WASA, and it also at some level, I don't want to say implicates, but it involves the minister.
Yeah, but it doesn't really implicate the minister.
Yeah,
but in the sense that obviously the minister made a certain allegation,
but WASA is indicted.
And WASA assigned an investigator. But it's so strange that after you have made up, and it will probably be a board decision, and that sounds like a board decision, to assign an investigator to look into this incident, because you're following due process, because of course you're looking at possible disciplinary action against the alleged perpetrator of the incident, which is Mr. Matthews. So you're going to have to follow certain IR principles, which would include an investigation and giving Mr. Matthews an opportunity to answer the allegations as would have been made. But it's highly unusual for a board, well, I want to believe it's highly unusual for a board to interfere with the independent investigation of the lead investigator into such an incident.
You sure you want to say that?
Because you want to,
you're sure it's highly unusual?
Because, Paul, you want to cover your IR bases.
You're sure it's highly unusual?
Well, that's why I say I want to believe it's highly unusual, because you want to make sure that the IR issues from any decision that emanates from that report can withstand the scrutiny of the industrial court.
Yeah. Yep.
So you wouldn't want any missteps. And not now. So the lead investigator, well, there's no lead. I suppose it's one investigator. The investigator is requesting certain documents to fulfill his investigative duty from you, and he has to file a Freedom of Information Act request to get it.
But that says a lot to her. The fact
that is amazing. That part is amazing.
Well, it speaks to, I mean, the Justice Kangaloo's condemnation of the conduct, you understand, of the WASA officials, to me, is bad enough.
Yeah.
You understand? And saying that there was credible evidence that there were attempts to, the word is pervert the course of justice, you know.
Yeah.
That's very damning, you know.
Yeah. Pervert the course of justice, you say, you know. So of course now the union is asking for is asking for heads to roll, as unions would.
The
unions would be very, you know.
The union got a victory, you understand?
Yeah, because they'll be like, well, wait.
No, but
the union would have always had issues with the WASA leadership anyway. They always have issues with it. So
yeah, but it also is an indictment, given what the Justice Kangaloo says, on how the management was running running the organization under that leadership. You understand?
Yeah.
Because if you could do that, allegedly to maintain a particular position on a particular issue, what else you will do? Why should I believe anything the management says after that? You understand?
Yep.
In something as seemingly, because I don't think it's simple, but in the scheme of allegations of corruption in Trinidad and Tobago, the wrong person driving a truck is mild. You understand? It's wrong, eh? Don't get me wrong. Unauthorized person should not be driving state entity vehicles. Yeah. But if you could, according to the judgment, seem to try to interfere in an investigation into that, what else will you concoct? You understand?
Yep.
And that's the issue. Is the issue of credibility of the management.
So
I know, is it that they're calling for police investigation into the whole thing?
Well, if I may go on a little bit, the PSA is demanding fairness and equity for workers such as Cecil Matthews, the target of the minister's allegation, as well as a police investigation into this matter to determine whether the offenses of misbehavior in public office and conspiracy to pervert the course of justice were committed by senior officials. To this end, we intend to write to the DPP and the Commissioner of Police to call for an examination of the facts and circumstances that led the High Court to make such strong pronouncements against WASA in its judgment.
Yeah,
that's rule and let the chips fall where they must.
Because they is it that they implicated the board of directors also?
Well, it's hard to say who specifically it's implicating, but certainly senior management. I'll have to say it. I'll have to say it. I'll have to say that. Yeah, I'll have to say it. I'll say to cover whoever may be responsible.
Cover everybody.
The union stated that the landmark judgment is a victory for all workers at WASA. We call upon WASA's newly minted CEO Keith Roy Halliday to earn his expensive.
Look how he walked into that.
You know, they have to bring that in.
Possible.
To earn his over $100,000 per month salary by making full and frank disclosure on this troubling matter, which goes to the heart of accountability and good.
Andrew makes a good point here. I'm Dr. The former executive chairman was executive chairman, so he was actually executive chairman. So you're right to say senior management, because at that time I think he's no longer there, but he was an executive chairman of WASA.
Yeah.
Which means he was head of the board and running the entity. You know, it never ends. But there's a serious indictment on the senior management of WASA. A serious indictment. Because this is a court judgment, a judge making these
statements.
And
in other related court matters, just as an aside, there were 7, I don't know if you mentioned this, that 7 police officers who were brought before the court in 2023 for allegedly extorting businesses in the Sangre Grande area have been discharged by a High Court matter. The officers were allowed to walk free yesterday by Master Sarah De Silva after the prosecution failed on 2 consecutive occasions to comply with directions of the court. You hear why the matter has ended?
Yeah, you need to read why the matter was dismissed.
After the prosecution failed on 2 consecutive occasions to comply with directions of the court. However, the officers can have the same charges relayed against them in the future and brought back before the court, since the charges were not dismissed. The officers, and of course they gave a list of all the officers, these 7 of them, they were charged with misbehavior in public office and conspiracy to pervert the course of justice, kind of mirroring what I just read, by willfully making false written statements to implicate a victim in a criminal investigation involving the operation of an illegal gaming house. during yesterday's virtual hearing, none of the 3 officers from the Professional Standards Bureau who laid the charges made an appearance.
Right, that's what I wanted you to read. Why the case fall apart?
There was also initially no police prosecutor present.
Right. So when Wendell used to be telling me about all this confidence in the Professional Standards Bureau, and I said exercise my long watery stoops, that's why. Professional Standards Bureau, long watery stoops.
Essentially, the master was left unaware whether the file had even been submitted to the Office of the Director of Public Prosecutions.
That's the one, long watery stoops.
For a state attorney to be appointed to prosecute the officers.
Himself cannot investigate. All right, I finally find the video. Okay. This is the Where's back and early yesterday. Now, let me tell you. You know, there's a point you always make, Richard. And these videos are evidence of that. We can't get body cam footage, but in quite a large percentage of crimes being committed in this country, there is CCTV private business or private residence footage, not so?
Yep.
That makes its way into the public domain.
Yeah, makes its way into social media. Yeah.
Which should be helping to solve more crimes, not so?
Yep.
But it just doesn't seem to be working. Because so many, for example, this video, you see the truck stop and people, the crazy driving and the whole incident unfolding. Wendell says he changed his mind about the police, the Professional Standards Bureau. He had a right. Watch. Watch the miscreants. Watch. It's like the wild, wild west.
Yeah, because all of those.
Imagine you driving down around West Main Road yesterday. Kill him. Imagine you driving down around West Main Road yesterday. And this is in the afternoon, eh?
Yes, you would have been terrified.
Gun, man running, shooting. How? I mean, this is in the afternoon, Monday afternoon. Not that Thursday or Friday make a difference, eh? Like the poor policeman bouncing to the man, because who fixing that man car? That the police, you understand?
Yeah.
You could be driving with your family. You could have just picked up your children.
And this whole situation just evolved. Yeah. Right in front of you. Yeah.
Right in front of you. It's like a movie.
Yeah, it's like a movie. It's crazy.
It's crazy already. So, do you have a question in mind? Do you want to pull that WASA question?
Well, if we could ask, should heads roll?
Yeah. Or should there be a police investigation?
Well, we can ask, should there be a police investigation into that incident? We can't take calls, but we could take the comments.
Mm-hmm.
So we can't take calls this morning because of a certain emergency situation that has arisen. But we can vote. You can vote via the comment section and messaging portals across the streaming platforms on our poll this morning, which I will tell you once it's up, and we'll take your votes from there.
So you can send messages.
So you can send messages and we'll get your votes.
Today's a question this morning.
So should there be a TTPS investigation into the recent issue at WASA? Of course, you would have heard me read excerpts from them, one of the articles about it this morning. So should there be a TTPS investigation into the recent issue at WASA? That's our poll. So while those poll results are strolling in, let me just
we could also ask, should the Professional Standards Bureau be disbanded?
That's Wendell's suggestion.
No, that's my suggestion, but I'm sure Wendell will support me.
So should there be a TTPS investigation in the recent issue of WASA? While we wait for those votes to come in, let me just go through the headlines pretty quickly. So the Daily Express for today, the headline, of course, today is November 19th, Tuesday, November 19th, 2024. PM says no to devaluation, blames forex shortage on increased appetite for online shopping. I won't bow to pressure is the headline that the Daily Express went with. PSA heads must roll at WASA. And the main picture is a fiery protest over deplorable road conditions at Welcome Road in Canoopia during a protest action yesterday.
Let me share some good news, Richard.
The residents were raising awareness over years of deplorable road conditions.
Let me share some great news that I should have shared with you, but in all the confusion, I forgot. Let's congratulate Noah Rudder, who is the youngest son of David Rudder, who's been awarded the 2025 Rhodes Scholarship to pursue postgraduate studies at Oxford University. The Rhodes Scholarship is the world's preeminent and oldest graduate fellowship. The rigorous selection process aims to choose young people with proven academic excellence, track record, exceptional character, leadership skills, and a desire to use their talent toward solving humanity's problem. Currently, Noah Rudder is pursuing a double major of peace, conflict, and justice from the Monk School of Global Affairs and Drama at the University of Toronto. He hopes to pursue a Master's of Public Policy and a Master of Fine Arts while at Oxford. When asked about the intersection of the two differing fields of study, he said, "It's what I know. It's the family I was born into. Culture is what I come from." So congratulations to Noah and by extension David and his mother for raising this excellent young man.
Congratulations.
So that's such a great piece of
wonderful achievement.
Yesterday.
On the back page of the Daily Express, workers stay away, port operations significantly affected. And trophy time, little parang queens, and there are pictures of Mia Ballantyne, Zaria Brittle Springer, and Maria Ramesa, and Caitlin Dilly-Paul, who are part of St. Gabriel's Girls Primary School Parang Championship, I guess. They won the parang competition. Junior parent competition.
So our question is, Monica, keep sending those votes. Should there be a TTPS investigation into the recent issue of WASA?
Miracle take central titles. East Mukarapo damaged Speyside. Prem Division survival hopes. And Matthew sets his sights on test debut. The Guardian for today, the front page. No end in sight as neither side budgets in bitter port pay dispute. And so just pictures about that. Extortion case against 7 cops dropped. Sports pages, Molino, York brings excitement. So that's talking about football. Newsday for today, front page. Victim in foiled Arangwes robbery. Kill them is the headline. And there is a picture concerning that incident which we just showed you. Divided House approves 5 new PSC members. And on the back page, Central School wins zonal intercall double miracles come true. Fatima claim under 17, under 20 national 3x3 basketball titles. Now you're in the know for our 3 daily newspapers this morning. Now we can start going through the votes. Should there be a TTPS investigation into the recent issue at WASA? You were voting all the time, and now we will go through the votes. And if you can read them, I'll pause at the TV.
I'm going to read them. That's it.
Yeah, you can read that.
All right. Boy Bedesi says yes. Calvert Gabriel says yes. Rennie Devine says yes. Slick Money Grip says yes. Wayne Bennett says yes. Lester Craigwell says yes. Andre says yes. Keep saying we can't take calls this morning, so we had to take all your votes via the chat. So send your votes via the chat this morning, please. Should there be a TTPS, a police investigation into that recent issue with that Justice Kangaloo made a stinging indictment on the WASA senior management, saying that there's credible evidence that there was an attempt to pervert the course of justice. They had to literally have a freedom of information inquiry to get basic information to investigate somebody allegedly a non-WASA worker driving a WASA vehicle. And all this simidimi in this investigation, right? Should there be a TTPS, a police investigation into the recent issue at WASA? Because attempting to pervert the course of justice is a serious allegation, eh?
Yep.
That's a very, very serious charge.
So our poll this morning, should there be a TTPS investigation into the recent issue at WASA, as indicated in the judgment by Justice Nadia Kangaloo? Should there be a TTPS investigation into the recent issue at WASA? That's our poll this morning. We can only take votes via the messaging portals and the streaming platforms. So you're going to have to send your votes in written form. We cannot take calls this morning, and we cannot read WhatsApp this morning. So we have to take it via the messaging portals, so that's where you're going to have to send your votes. I see John Boswell says yes. Lincoln is giving a message. He's saying that he bet there will be a fire in WASA before the new CEO takes over. Oh, come on, Lincoln. Anthony Bigger says yes.
But he's saying, yes. I wonder if this money worth it is because he's not from Trinidad and Tobago. This headache in this country that I'm going to inherit.
Beauty Culture says yes. So we can only take your votes via messaging or the comment section on the YouTube stream, or if you're watching us on other streaming platforms, only via the messaging portals. That's the only way we can take votes this morning. We have an emergency situation this morning that Steve is dealing with, which has compromised our ability to take votes through other places. Marcia Rock says yes.
So why I'm trying to figure out what is the impetus for not just letting the investigation go through normally?
I don't know. Michael Grandison says yes. It seems WASA is allegedly and then allegedly a den of criminality. Is that what he's saying?
Why?
So Michael Grandison says yes.
Who has something to gain from not letting the investigation go through properly?
Royalty Forever says yes. And that's why I said it's a kind, to me, an unusual occurrence, because you want to cover your IR bases, and investigations are usually the first step in dealing with any possible IR issues.
Mm-hmm.
It's the first step. When Lala says yes,
and you want to find if there was a breach of procedure or regulations.
Yes. If what?
And you want to find if there was a breach in procedure or regulations.
Yep.
Because a non-authorized person allegedly driving a vehicle has implications.
Quality Finch says yes. So we can only take votes this morning via the messaging portals on the various streaming platforms. We have a slight technical emergency that we're dealing with. I shouldn't say slight. An emergency that's being dealt with. And Steve had to actually leave the physical office to attend to. So we are a little compromised this morning with regard to take votes through other means. So should there be a TTPS investigation into the recent issue at WASA? That's our poll this morning. You'll have heard some of the article this morning.
Yesterday, International Men's Day or something.
That's it. I'm not sure, actually. I am not sure. Esther Adams says yes. Of course, we can't take WhatsApp either, because we wouldn't have access to WhatsApp. So we can only take it via the messaging portals on the various platforms like YouTube or Facebook, wherever you're watching us from. That's the only place we can take votes from. And our poll this morning, should there be a TTPS investigation into the recent issue at WASA? That's our poll.
Hey guys, I don't know if you can hear me, but it is time for the news.
Okay, wait, so the thing I don't come with no attitude there.
What a jail is this? Moving on.
So
it is time for news on Power 102 Digital.
Good morning.
This is your news bulletin from Power 102 Digital.
These are your news headlines to 7 o'clock. Government backs the nominees for the PSC. Prime Minister Dr. Keith Rowley says the government will not devalue the TT dollar. Government gives its support to proposed vetting unit in the TTPS. Port standoff continues, and police officers shoot and kill one suspect, wound another, and arrest a third after robbery attempt. Details in a moment. This is news to 7 o'clock on Power 102 Digital. I'm Avril Sintil-Bob. Good morning. Government has expressed confidence in the 5 names nominated to become members of the Police Service Commission as offered by the President. Those nominated are Dr. Wendell C. Wallace, Anika Fritz Brown, Ethel Hector Berkeley, Roger Baburam, and Kevin Ramdani. On November 15th, the term of the former commission members, retired Judge Judith Jones, Maxine Atong, Maxine King, Rajiv Prasad, and Ian Ramdani expired. The qualifications of the nominees were read to the Parliament by the Minister of National Security, Fitzgerald Hines, who indicated his and government's support for the nominees of the PSC.
We propose the nominees as offered by Her Excellency. We are confident, based on the submissions from Her Excellency and our own perusal of the profiles, the background, and our general knowledge of those who have been offered to serve, particularly in the case of Mr. Ramdani, who have served for the last 3 years. We are confident that they are suitably qualified and deserving of the opportunity to serve Trinidad and Tobago in the way that we present.
The Prime Minister says government will not bow to special interest pressure to devalue the TT dollar. Speaking on the foreign exchange issue for the first time yesterday, the Prime Minister said the pressure to devalue was coming from people who largely have foreign exchange. He said devaluation will increase costs and make those with foreign exchange wealthier. Dr. Keith Rowley said this move could have serious implications for the population. It was revealed that $2.5 billion is injected by the government into the local economy every year. However, the government admits there is an increased demand for Forex due to the growth of the economy, a preference for outside goods and online buying. Talks are being held with stakeholders by the finance minister to find out from commercial banks and business owners on the issue. Prime Minister Dr. Rowley revealed the importance of the deliberations.
There's a misalignment between the appetite to spend foreign exchange and the ability to earn foreign exchange. We do not create foreign exchange in this country except by earning it, and we can generate an infinite appetite to spend it, and that's where the management system comes in. The government has certain arrangements in place to ensure that certain basics are funded, like medicine, food, manufacturing support, and so on. That's the government's role in managing it.
The Parliament has been told of the proposed composition of the vetting unit of the Trinidad and Tobago Police Service. Recently, there was the signing of a memorandum of understanding between the government and the United States Drug Enforcement Administration to set up this unit. Prime Minister Dr. Rowley explained the unit will be made up of persons from law enforcement entities with authority to probe major transnational crime. Over the past year, appropriate consultations were held on this matter. According to the Prime Minister, the unit will report directly to the Commissioner of Police.
The proposed composition of the vetted unit would include members of law enforcement entities from Trinidad and Tobago with the lawful authority to investigate major transnational organized crime. They would be supported by the United States Drug Enforcement Agency during their investigations. Extensive stakeholder consultations were held over the past year from initiation of this proposal, Madam Speaker.
The Seamen and Waterfront Workers Trade Union says it will fight for the 12% wage increases that it claims is rightfully theirs and for an improved, efficient, productive, and sustainable Port of Spain. The ongoing impasse at the Port of Spain remains unresolved, causing major disruptions to operations and adversely affecting businesses. There seemed to be no end in sight as neither side has budged on the port pay issue. SWWTU says it believes a competitive and efficient port can only be achieved through the immediate implementation of the framework agreement and the international best practice it claims was legitimately negotiated with the Port Authority of Trinidad and Tobago in 2015. However, on Friday, Parliament was told by the Works and Transport Minister legal advice informed the SWWTU and the Port Authority the memorandum of understanding is not enforceable, but the union has refused the submitted offer and both sides are still to reach a settlement on the matter.
The legal advice from two senior counsel, the Port Authority of Trinidad and Tobago and the SWWTU, who advise that the MOA is not enforceable. The SWWTU was provided with an offer for a period 2014 to 2017 and 2017 to 2020. Given the impact of the current impasse, PATT has signaled its desires to continue negotiation in good faith, but is challenged with the long-term inflationary economic impact.
He said the guidelines for the negotiations were not followed, and so the arrangement cannot be enforced.
There was a committee headed by Minister Larry Hawaii. I don't know if that was altered then. However, what we can say is they do get guidelines from the committee on negotiations. And again, I just want to reiterate, there are 3 bargaining units at the port, and the issue is with one of the bargaining units.
You are listening to news on Power 102 Digital to 7 o'clock. Police officers shot and killed one suspect, wounded another, and arrested a third after an attempted robbery of a water delivery truck on Orangua's main road yesterday. Police said around 1 p.m. the drama began after delivery men from Blue Waters parked the truck along the main road. 2 men, one armed, jumped into the truck attempting to rob them. The driver and the delivery man began to struggle with the 2 suspects. Officers of the interagency task force who were patrolling nearby heard the commotion and ran to the scene. One officer saw the suspects running south along Orangua's main road and called out to them to stop. However, one of them opened fire on the officer who returned fire. More officers in a parked police vehicle also responded. Police had a silver AD wagon pulled up alongside the suspects as they were running away and they got inside. However, police officers continued pursuing the suspects and managed to intercept the vehicle they were in. There was an exchange of gunfire between the officers and one of the suspects, resulting in one of the suspects being fatally shot by police. The other 2 suspects exited the vehicle and fled. However, their escape was short-lived as they were eventually captured. One of them was shot and injured. The dead suspect is yet to be identified. Investigations are continuing. Finally, here's weather news for the period today till midnight. Trinidad and Tobago, partly cloudy conditions are expected with occasional light to moderate showers occurring. There is a medium chance of a few heavy showers or thunderstorms. Some cloudiness will persist overnight with a few lingering showers likely. Gusty winds and street or flash flooding may occur near heavy showers or thunderstorms. You can expect a temperature high of 32 degrees Celsius at Piarco International Airport and 31 degrees Celsius at Crown Point in Tobago. Recapping your headlines to 7 o'clock. Government backs the nominees for the PSC. Prime Minister Dr. Keith Rowley says the government will not devalue the TT dollar. Government gives its support to proposed vetting unit in the TTPS. Port standoff continues and police officers shoot and kill one suspect, wounds another and arrests a third after a robbery attempt. I'm Avril Sindhilbab. That was news to 7 o'clock on Power 102 Digital. Look out for more news coming up at 12 noon today, and there is an update coming your way at 8 o'clock this morning. For more details, log on to power102fm.com.
Up to date and credible. Power 102 Digital.
Thank you, Avril.
You are so welcome, Dr. Paul Richards. Good morning to you and good morning to Richard.
Make us sit down and work now.
Cannot. I have to go and do the people work. My boss, Dr. Paul Richards, he is a tunky.
Your boss is Jesus
so
Christ.
I really have to go and work.
Your boss is Jesus Christ.
Good morning, Evie.
Good morning, Richie Rich. It's so awesome to hear from you. How are you, honey?
I am good.
It was awesome to hear from me. Okay.
I didn't say that, Paul. I didn't.
I'm glad it was awesome to hear from you. It was awesome to hear from Richard.
I didn't say, Paul, you know, it's always awesome to hear from you. I have to say it each time. I don't get to talk to Richard all the time.
When I am when I bring my lunch, you don't come with your chopsticks or your fork to intercept my lunch in the future, and you call Richard.
Look,
Just
I
saying.
can't today. I really can't.
Maybe I was gonna buy lunch for you
Men,
today,
please
and
enjoy
you
the
just spoil
rest
that. You just
of the
spoiled it.
program as I go and I do my due
You
diligence.
just
It was
spoiled it,
wonderful
though.
speaking with both of you.
Have a good day.
You
See you in a
too.
bit.
I look forward to seeing you in a bit.
Yes, have a good day. All right.
Oh, good. And I'll see a prompt, not a prompt, a headline come across from CNN on the phone. Sitting at a desk all day can put your heart at risk, even if you work out. New research finds. I just needed to read that this morning. Thank you, CNN.
Anyway,
Thank you,
we have a
CNN.
guest. We have a guest standing by. So can you regale us with the
I'll give you the results. I went through the results. So they had some other people voting in: David Wares, Esther Adams, David Nelson. So I got all your votes. Down to, well, that's it. Those are the remaining votes. So in all, our poll this morning was should there be a TTPS investigation into the recent issue at WASA coming out of that judgment with a scathing report from Justice Nadia Kangaloo. 22 of you voted in the allotted time and in the compromised way we could communicate with you this morning. So 22 of you voted, and all of you said yes, there should be an investigation by the TTPS into that issue. So the yeas have it this morning. Of course, you can continue to vote on this poll throughout the day, through all programming, and we'll give you the final result tomorrow morning, which will be Wednesday. And
Good morning, Dr. Farrell.
Good morning. Good morning to you and to Richard.
Thank you for joining us this morning. How are you this morning?
I'm very well, thank you. Very well.
That is a real organized, neat office boy. Wow. I'm awkward. That is a real organized. I thought I had ADHD, but every certificate is in exact order, you know. Nothing is askew. An orderly mind creates an orderly space. Thank you for joining us this morning. Of course, we wanted to talk about a couple of issues.
Yes.
Let's start with the Prime Minister's pronouncements yesterday that special interest persons or groups are the ones demanding a devaluation. What are your thoughts on that statement from the Prime Minister? You want a serious question now?
Yeah, a serious question would be preferable. I mean, I don't know what to make of that, quite frankly. But first of all, I think the very idea of using the word devaluation to me simply does not compute. I don't understand the use of the term, to tell you the truth, Paul. In 1993. What we did deliberately, and this is under a PNM government, this is Manning, the first incarnation of the Manning administration, the country moved deliberately to a managed float system. We abandoned the fixed exchange rate system. We abandoned exchange controls in April of 1993. And therefore, we had a system which worked, I would have to say, beautifully for 20 years. There were no complaints. There was no crisis. There were queues, but there was no crisis. We had foreign exchange coming into the system, that is true, and so on, but the system worked well. The exchange rate was adjusted by the central bank in accordance with a set of criteria that are used by many countries. Now, because most countries today, Richard, have abandoned fixed exchange rates. Now, let me just say before that it is entirely possible for a country to maintain a fixed exchange rate regime. Barbados does it, the Bahamas does it, the Eastern Caribbean countries do it within our region. Now, the thing is that when you do that, if you accept that you are not going to change your exchange rate, then you have to accept the consequences of so doing. And the consequences of so doing must be that your fiscal policy and your monetary policy then bear the burden of adjustment. The economics of that is just so well known. It just that you know. So if you decide that you are not changing your exchange rate, you want to keep it fixed, then you have to make adjustments in your economy to external shocks. The burden of it has to fall on fiscal policy, that is on the budget, and it has to fall on monetary policy. We had a shock in 2015 where gas prices fell sharply. All of the prognostications, which turned out to be true, is that in fact those prices were going to remain low. So the shock was what we call a permanent shock. It was structural. It wasn't something that would change in a few months, and therefore it required adjustment. Fine. Now, if in that context of requiring adjustment, you decide that you are not going to change your exchange rate, you're going to keep it fixed, then you've got to adjust on the fiscal side. But we have run fiscal deficits for 9 years. We have run up our external debt for 9 years. We have run up our domestic debt for 9 years, and we have run down our foreign exchange reserves from $11 billion down to $5.5 billion. And we have used up part of our Heritage and Stabilization Fund. That is how we've dealt with the adjustment. So
what you're saying is we're funding the exchange rate through several different mechanisms which are drawing down on our reserves.
Absolutely correct. That is absolutely right. And in addition to that, monetary policy has not supported the adjustment. With all due respect to my friends at the central bank, monetary policy in those circumstances, you should have increased your interest rates to reduce demand, to get the balance of payments back into order. We have not done that. In fact, interest rates here have been kept low. In fact, lower than they were in the United States in the last couple of years. And that is an inducement for people to move their money out of Trinidad. In other words, if I have $100,000 US, I would prefer to put it into a US Treasury, which will pay me 2.5% or 3%, than in a Trinidad and Tobago Treasury bill, which will pay me 0.5%.
Which is what I was suggesting to Richard this morning. How much? That's not capital flight, but how do you classify that? And how much of that do you think is happening in the context of the limited availability of forex presently? Is that one of the factors, including the consumerism, etc.?
Yes, unequivocally yes, and it is not capital flight. Let me just explain again. In 1993, we liberalized capital controls. We, unlike countries at that point in time, we liberalized capital controls. People could move their money out if they wanted to. We allowed people to have foreign currency deposits in local banks and in foreign banks if they so wanted. We removed the surrender requirement. That is to say, if anybody earned foreign exchange prior to 1993 under the Exchange Control Act, you had to surrender it to an authorized dealer. You couldn't take your US dollars and put it under your mattress, because if the police come, they could arrest you and charge you. We abolished that. So we created a system where if anybody had US dollars, they could take it and do whatever they wanted with it. So in my view, there's no question about capital flight. Capital flight is people are taking rational decisions on the basis of the information that they have in front of them, and they are acting accordingly. Similarly, with this utterly, quite frankly, nonsensical notion about credit cards are responsible for the thing. It is nonsensical. A credit card is simply a means of payment. That is all it is. 25 years ago, we didn't have credit cards. We had traveler's checks and we had those kinds of things. Those were the means of payment. Today, people effect their transactions and they effect their purchases using credit cards and debit cards. That is normal.
So is the notion that there are more purchases being made with credit cards as that mechanism, contributing to forex shortages, accurate?
No. Credit cards are contributing. Credit cards are being used more because people have credit cards. But if you look at the data, the sales of foreign exchange, which is the data that you have to look at, is about the same as it was several years ago. $6 billion coming to the commercial banking system. It is simply that people are effecting it with credit cards. Whereas 20 years ago, they would have been using other means to effect those purchases. And the other issue with the credit cards, Paul, is that when credit cards are used by all of us, everybody uses credit cards now, two things. One is the commercial banks and the central bank do not necessarily know what you have used it for. You could use a credit card for anything. You can buy a cruise ship journey with it. You could buy machinery for your small business. You could buy anything with a credit card. But it therefore becomes difficult to classify what it is. And this is one of the reasons why we have these large net errors and omissions in the balance of payments, because those transactions cannot be classified. We can't tell what they're used for. The second thing about credit cards is that when you use a credit card, or I use a credit card, it puts the commercial bank in a situation where they have effectively sold foreign exchange, right? So you've already made the purchase and they have paid it on your behalf, but they have to now figure out, where am I going to get the foreign exchange from in order to conclude the transaction? You see what I mean? So the commercial banks have, over the last several years, have found themselves, several of them have put themselves into what is called an oversold position. That is, they sell more foreign exchange than they actually have on hand. And they would do that because there's an expectation that the central bank, which is going to inject funds into the system periodically to put them right. Now, the central bank has kept its injections level, $100 million US. That's what it is a month. That's what it has done. So the commercial banks then found themselves in a situation where they were very often oversold and they were not getting the flows coming back in from the central bank to compensate them. And that's why they have reduced the credit card limits to people, because they could not, as banks, prudently continue to put themselves in that kind of situation. So there's a lot of
the essential issue. I mean, this is really simplifying it, oversimplifying it, I should say, that we found ourselves in a position where supply and demand has taken over, and that we are making less US dollars as
Correct.
a country.
Correct.
But our spending habits continue at the same rate as they would have when we were making more US dollars. And
That is correct.
Is that essentially our situation?
Precisely. Exactly. Because the supply of foreign exchange has in fact come down. If you look at our natural gas production, it has gone down from 4 BCF per day to 2.5 BCF per day. Natural gas prices have come down. Our oil production has now fallen to less than 50,000 barrels a day. All of that means that less money is coming into the system. The VAT refunds has had a perverse effect on that. The energy companies, for example, they incur VAT, and therefore they have to get a VAT refund. The Minister of Finance is not giving them their VAT refunds. When he does give them their VAT refunds, they get TT dollars. It means, therefore, that they have less incentive to be able to bring US dollars into the system. And that then affects the flow of foreign exchange into the system. The petrochemicals companies, the pont leases companies, ammonia, methanol, are all struggling for production. Production in the pont leases companies has gone down significantly because of the lack of gas. Many of them are on gas sales contracts that are 2 or 3 years, and therefore they can't plan properly. They can't do turnarounds. One of them, Nutrien, took a significant impairment in their Trinidad books because of these short-term gas sales contracts. And then that in turn then affects the amount of foreign exchange that they remit into the system and the amount of taxes that they pay into the system. All of this is what has been happening. And then when we look down the road, we are being told that, well, the situation is going to continue as it is at least until 2027, when hopefully Dragon comes into play and Lauren Manatee come into play and so on and so forth. But in the meantime, the situation is therefore clearly going to continue to get worse. So it's a very simple thing, the economics of it, Paul, is not hard. If the government wants to maintain a fixed exchange rate, which it has done since 2015, then it has to do the other things. It has to have a sensible fiscal policy, which we have not done, and it has to have a sensible monetary policy, which we have not done. Hence, external debt has gone up, domestic debt has gone up, and we are where we are.
So, Dr. Farrell, let me ask, the issue of the monetary policy and the increase of the interest rates by the central bank,
Yes.
which I'm getting from you is long overdue, that they should have increased those interest rates. What would be the effect for our listeners I'm trying to figure out why it's not being done. Is there a political reason why it's not being done, or an economic reason?
There's political. It's all political. It's so let me try to say what we are doing from a policy point of view in this country is that we are subsidizing everything. In other words, a subsidy means that people are not paying the true cost of the thing. We are not paying the true cost of water. We are not paying the true cost of electricity. We are not paying the true cost of transportation because of the fuel subsidy. We are not paying the true cost of imported goods because the exchange rate is subsidized. Now, when you are not paying the true cost of something, it has to come from somewhere. There is no free lunch. That is lesson number 1 in Economics 101. There is no free lunch. So you cannot continue to subsidize everything. We've been subsidizing it and using the rents from the energy sector over the years to continue with this subsidy. But the perverse effect of that is that when people are not paying the true cost of something, it means that as far as they're concerned, this is what the cost of water is, and this is what I'm entitled to. This is what the cost of electricity is, and this is what I'm entitled to. This is what the cost of imported goods are, and this is therefore what I'm entitled to. And we're not taking the difficult decisions in order to do that. Now, that comes on to the point which I thought you wanted to talk about is the whole question of wages and the question of salary adjustments for the top officials and so on.
We're going to come to that because you made a pronouncement.
But the things are linked, if you see what I mean. Because what we've done is that we have kept people's wages down. And we've kept them down in an attempt to maximize the number of people who are employed in the country. We are boasting of an unemployment rate, which is probably lower than that in the United States and lower than that in the United Kingdom. And everybody knows that it is not true. We all know it's not true.
And we haven't even broached the conversation of underemployment and people qualified at a certain level, but we educating people and they're very underemployed.
That's correct.
I just want to ask one more question, Dr. Farah, before we move on to that issue of the wages. Yes. The issue of the VAT refunds to the energy companies and in Trinidad and Tobago, and the Minister of Finance had indicated recently he's going to ask them to pay their taxes in US dollars.
They do already.
Yeah. So what's your opinion on that? No.
So let's just understand the arrangement that we have had in this country since I think it's around 1969, 1970, is that the energy companies, i.e. the upstream companies, pay their petroleum profits tax in US dollars. It is an arrangement. There is no legal basis for it. Right? They do it as because the Trinidad and Tobago dollar is the legal tender in this country. So that if I have a tax liability, the government cannot tell me that you have to pay it in US dollars. If I give them the TT dollars, they have to take it because the TT dollar is legal tender in this country. But by an arrangement which does not affect the companies, because the companies earn US dollars and all of their transactions and businesses in US dollars, they remit those US dollars to the Central Bank of Trinidad and Tobago, which then credits the government with the TT dollar equivalent. Now, there are other taxes that the upstream companies also are liable for, things like unemployment levy and SPT and all signature bonuses and all those things. So some of those things are not caught under the arrangement to pay in US dollars. And that is what the minister is talking about. But he's talking about bringing legislation to make that happen. And I would love to see what that legislation looks like, because I think that, in my view, if you have legislation which intends to compel somebody to pay taxes in some currency other than Trinidad and Tobago dollars, I think that would be unconstitutional, but I will leave it to the companies concerned to make a decision as to what they do in those circumstances.
Now, the issue of the Salaries Review Commission, of course, has spurred national conversation.
Yes.
It's not the first time we've heard this. The Review Commission sent a recommendation some months ago, which the Minister of Finance identified as having some anomalies. He sent it back, and now they've come back with these recommendations about high-ranking public officials, including the office of the president, the prime minister, parliamentarians, senators, judges,
Right.
Senior public servants, etc. In the present context, of course, there's been a conversation about whether or not it's an appropriate time, quote unquote, given the prime minister's pronouncements about hold straight until 2027 when Dragon is due to, and other revenue sources are due to mature, and whether or not parliamentarians the cabinet should approve these recommendations by the Salary Review Commission, including the increased salaries for the prime minister, cabinet members, etc. in the context. Now, you have come out and said, well, you think these people are, and I'm paraphrasing here, underpaid comparatively, and the country can afford it. Of course, the context of people's remonstrations is that, well, 4% for public servants increase and whole strain and economic constraints in the country.
Yes.
Can we separate the two?
I think it's important to separate the two, because the question of what these offices merit in terms of their compensation has to be separated from the question as to whether it's a good time to do it, which is a political question. That's not a question about economics or a question about compensation management. It's a question about politics. And so therefore, right now, the optics of doing something like that right now might not be politically acceptable. But my point is that the question of the merit of those salaries for those officers is entirely right, and the question of affordability simply doesn't even arise. It's a non-question.
So jump in the bucket.
Because it's only a couple of hundred people. I think there are 1,000 people that you're talking about there, right? It's a drop in the bucket, right? So I think that from a merit point of view, people get confused. Not confused. People tend to take an ad hominem kind of view of the matter. So they would say, well, I don't think that Rowley should get it, or I don't think that Archie should get it, or I don't think that the DPP should get it, right? But it's not about that. The Salary Review Commission doesn't deal with individuals. It deals with offices.
The merit of the office and the value of the office.
And it looks at the internal comparisons within the public service. And I would imagine it also looks at external comparisons. That is to say, it looks at positions, for example, in the private sector, for people who are doing comparable jobs and so on. And on the basis of that, they come up with a rational, professional determination as to what these office holders should get. Part of my argument is that we have a philosophy that we've been operating with here for the last 50 years. And that is to say that if you are working in the public sector, you're supposed to get a low pay. And I think that is ridiculous. I think that it is wrong. I prefer the philosophical position of a country like Singapore, which recognizes that people in the public sector perform extremely difficult, onerous, and challenging jobs, even more so than in the private sector. In the private sector, you have very specific targets and objectives, very narrow. In the case of the job, for example, of a prime minister, in the case of the job of a DPP, in the case of the job of a judge, these are difficult jobs. In the case of a permanent secretary dealing with complex issues, for example, around climate change and those types of things, require special skills, special knowledge, which are not readily available. And so therefore, to get people to be able to fill those jobs and to perform them competently, you've got to pay people appropriately. You've got to attract the right kind and quality and competence of people into the public sector. And we've not been doing that. And part of the problem that we are having is that because we have this philosophy that public sector people shouldn't get no money, and if they get money, then is a problem and so on. What then happens is that then people, individuals who ought to or might otherwise desire to work in the public sector say, no, I'm not going there. Why, for example, should the prime minister of the country, responsible for all that he is responsible for, be paid no better than that of a bank manager? I mean, seriously, that's what we do. And is that what we are saying? Are we saying that the job of a chief justice is no more valuable than that of a senior bank manager? No. To my mind, maybe I'm wrong, but to my mind, I think that is inappropriate. So the question of timing, whether it's the right thing, that's a political decision. They will decide that for themselves.
Yeah, that's an optics and political thing.
That's about optics. But I'm thinking about the merits of the thing for these office holders. I think it's. I think it's.
And very often people, as you said, don't separate the personality, the Rowley or the Kamla or whatever.
That's right. From the office. Yeah. Exactly.
But I think part of your commentary that ended up in the Guardian, I think it is also spoke to performance management and performance assessment.
Absolutely.
How do you do that in the case of a prime minister or a senior cabinet minister? What's the framework for that?
Well, the short answer to that is that you can't. All you have to do is say you have to vote them out of the next election. But in the case of other officers, for example, permanent secretaries, even a judge, right? We are the Advisory Committee on Constitutional Reform. We are saying that judges have to be held accountable, not only for the fact of being protected in terms of the judicial independence, but a judge is performing a job and he's supposed to do the job competently. And if a judge is not doing the job competently, that is to say the judge is not working as hard as he should, he's not taking as many things, taking long to write his judgments, then you read to get him out of the judiciary. If the DPP, for example,
Trinidad and Tobago, Dr.
But I'm not saying poor. I'm saying that it should. I'm saying that it should. So I'm prepared to pay the judge a decent salary for a judge, but I also want to hold the judge to account for performance and for integrity. I want to hold all these office holders to account for performance. A permanent secretary, for example, if the permanent secretary is not up to the task, then they need to go home. But what we have is that we have a career public service where it is virtually, even the police service, it is virtually impossible to take these people out of the offices, even if they're not performing. The most we do is that we shift them around and we move them from one ministry to the other.
Isn't the fundamental issue of IR and HR practices and performance management through the system part of the issue? Because very often these people just get by on seniority and not necessarily meritocracy.
Correct. And I've made the point, some of my colleagues in the Public Service Commission don't agree with me, but I think that Regulation 18 in the Public Service Regulations is the most perverse thing. This whole idea that seniority trumps everything, and seniority de facto trumps everything. They tell me, no, that is not so. But the reality that we have on the ground in respect of the police service, for example, in respect of the public servants, is that seniority is the determinant for people's progress up the ranks. And it shouldn't be. It should be performance. And then you need to have a performance management system that holds people to account for their performance. And if they are not up to snuff, if they are not up to the job, then we'd have to let them go. And let them go and find a job somewhere else. But that then gets me to the point, Paul. It doesn't happen. But what we've been operating since the 1970s here, and I try to make the point that the Black Power movement in 1970, when unemployment was extremely high in this country, scared the government. And therefore, when the oil money started to come in from 1973, the government made sure it adopted a philosophy, it adopted a policy posture of maximizing the number of people with jobs. I'm not talking about the number of people working. We gave people jobs. We had DUDE, we had LID, we had CPEP, we have all these things, right? So people have a job, but people are not necessarily working. And the reason is so we want to keep unemployment low. Now, where does that money come from? Well, I am saying to you that part of where the money comes from is that the people at the top end of the public sector, your prime ministers, your ministers, your parliamentarians. Parliamentarians, by the way, ought to be a full-time job and paid appropriately, right? Your permanent secretaries. What happens is that we drop the salaries of those people because we say that they shouldn't be well paid. And we take those funds and we spread those funds out among all the rest of the other people there who are working in CPEP and working in URP and so on and so forth. Whereas the real challenge for us as a society is to how do we find and create jobs outside of the public sector, in the private sector, to absorb those people. And we've created a monster. Tobago, for example, is the worst example of that. 6 out of 10 people in Tobago are employed by the Tobago House of Assembly. It is absurd.
Well, it's unsustainable in a real sense.
And it's unsustainable, of course.
Yeah.
But how do you, if you look at Tobago, how do you fix a problem like that, Dr. Parr? Because you have what, 50,000, 60,000 people living in an island. I mean, and there's a lot of migration to Trinidad.
Yes.
So how sustainable are private jobs if it is you don't have a huge tourism sector in comparison to the other islands?
And that is precisely and exactly, Richard, what Tobago needs to have. And therefore, this is why Tobago shot itself in the foot by dissing the Sandals project. I had done some work for the former Secretary of Finance, Joel Jack, there on the question of developing resort tourism in Tobago. That if you had a Sandals, and that if you had a couple of other all-inclusive resorts, people talk about all-inclusives and all-inclusives are problematic and so on. But if we brought in a couple of all-inclusive resorts into Tobago, we get airlift into Tobago. Sandals would have brought the traffic into the airport. And then from there, you then build out all the other aspects of tourism in Tobago, your ecotourism and all those kinds of things and so on and so forth. Tobago, I did some work for the former Secretary of Finance, where I was showing that, in fact, you could have gotten 500,000 people coming through Tobago, plus another 500,000 domestic tourists coming to Tobago. Yes, the island is a small island with only 50 or 60,000 people on it, but just like Barbados, just like Jamaica, Jamaica has 2 million tourists every year, right? Barbados has 1 million tourists. Barbados has a population of 300,000 people, and they have 1 million tourists who come through the island, which means that effectively your population size mushrooms in terms of being able to supply goods and services and so on and so forth. That's what Tobago needs. But Tobago has had this, unfortunately, at least not everybody in Tobago, but some people in Tobago have had this very unfortunate kind of approach to dealing with these kinds of developmental issues. Tobago has to deal with tourism. It has to use tourism to develop and to grow.
I want to go back to the conversation about the Forex. And of course, it's a very multi-layered, multi-dimensional issue because it speaks to the framework of the entire economy in Trinidad and Tobago, as you've articulated earlier on. And the conversation about the consumables, including cars. What are your thoughts on the issue of cars and the number of motor vehicles and that drawdown as an example of consumerism? And of course, it drives a particular sector in the financial and commercial sector. But is that one of the answers, or is the answer simply earn more money, subsidize less?
It is not an example of consumerism, with all due respect to the journalists who have been writing about that. It is not. I just asked you the question. On your way to work this morning, how many buses did you see on the road?
Well, don't start me on that.
Well, exactly. And that's the point. The reason why people have cars in Trinidad is because they have no choice. Mm-hmm. You either have a car or you walk, right? Because we have no public transportation system in the country. I mean, PTSD, forget it, right? PTSD needs to have hundreds
it's a waste
of buses.
of $400 million every year. I'm sorry.
Yeah. I mean, so, at the Economic Advisory Board, we were looking at this whole question of transportation and so on. And it was pointed out to us that the PTSD, every time they want to bring in new buses, they bring in some new model of buses, right? So that means that they can't use the parts from the previous ones and so on. And of course, the thing that, and you look at the kind of service that is provided, right, by people, and the PH drivers have come in to fill that void, and which of course means that there is insurance issues for people. If you get injured or killed in a PH car, what is your recourse? Who is responsible? But PH cars are now basically legal in Trinidad because the law is not enforced to say that people are, shouldn't be using that mode of transportation. But the answer is an efficient and effective public transportation system. That when you know, that when you go to places like London or New York and so on and so forth, what do? You take public transportation.
So, but the issue you spoke earlier on about a basically subsidized society, Dr. Farrell.
Yes.
You said it's been subsidized since 2015. It's been subsidized before that because we've
Before
running
that,
deficit
before
budgets. We've been running deficit budgets
Oh, yes.
since 2008.
Yeah.
Thereabouts.
Yeah.
How do you because it's every response from the government in any iteration is going to be economic and political.
Yes.
Because part of the government's mandate is sustain power and moving away from a subsidized society because the society doesn't realize how much it's subsidized, quite frankly.
That's right.
We become so accustomed to it, we think it's a right.
That's right. Entitlement.
We think it's an entitlement. We not even the manufacturing sector that's growing benefits tremendously from subsidized electricity.
Yes.
Right? And subsidized gas, as it will, for transportation as part of a major input in their businesses.
Yes.
How does a government, any government, that comes into power, deal with that? Because if you look to reverse that even slowly, there are political reverberations associated with that.
Yes.
Because then people have to start to pay more and they're going to get less grants and they're going to pay more for electricity and water. And the price of goods and services is going to fly up. And it's going to become very pressure filled.
Yes.
It's an almost impossible decision for any government in that case to deal with that in a sustainable manner and stay in power.
Well, because the objective is to stay in power. The objective is not to do the right thing. And all I would say to you, Paul, is that when the country's foreign exchange reserves have run out, at that point in time, you ain't going to have any other choice except to go to the IMF, and the IMF will then impose on you what you should have done for yourself. They will tell you remove the subsidies, and you will have to remove the subsidies, and so on, and the country is just going to get licked up, which is what happens under IMF programs. The point is, I don't want us to go to an IMF program. In fact, I have always been fearful, and I quite frankly, I do not like the IMF, and therefore my view on the IMF is that we should avoid them at all costs.
But the last time a government attempted to or had to deal with severe economic issues, let's just use the NAR as an example.
Yes.
We had a social uprising.
That's right. But the NAR inherited bad policy from the previous PNM Chambers administration. The Chambers administration, when oil prices dropped significantly in 1981-82, the Chambers administration refused the central bank's advice in terms of how to deal with the problem. And what we did is that we instituted instead the EC0 system of trying to ration the foreign exchange, which is exactly what we are doing now. It is mind-boggling to people like myself and people like Wendell, Motley, and Uric Bob that we are now trying to do today the same nonsense, the same bad policy that we did in the 1980s that eventually led us to run down the foreign exchange reserves by 1986 and left the NAR with absolutely no choice but to go to the IMF in 1988. And so therefore the legacy perhaps of this administration is that it will leave the next administration with no choice but to go to the IMF.
I'm glad you mentioned that because it's part of the rationale. And I'm asking you to go into call Minister Imber's mind here, which is probably a dangerous thing to do. We are on the cusp of a general election.
Yes.
So any major structural shift that affects the population in a pressurized way will have implications for the next general election. And that's part of what the government is trying to manage themselves through.
That is true. I have no doubt. I mean, I'm not a political scientist or a political type, but I would say that is absolutely true. But when you leave the tough policies for late in your term, then you're gonna tie your hands, obviously, in those circumstances. And it should have been done early. So in 2016, the government had the opportunity then to deal with the situation. You know, one of the things that I have said is that the IMF is correct about one thing, and that is that adjustment should be done quickly. When you get into an IMF program, a standby arrangement with the IMF lasts 18 months, and you are monitored on a quarterly basis to meet those targets. And there's a very good reason for that. You've got to make the adjustment quickly. We stretched out the adjustment process. We fixed the exchange rate. We ran up the debt. We incurred fiscal deficits, hoping to deal with the situation that way. And then what happened in 2019, 2020? COVID come and hit you, which deepened the problem. We are still not fully adjusted out of that shock from 2015 because the foreign exchange reserves are still declining and the fiscal deficit is still there. You will know when you have adjusted, when you've got your fiscal situation back into balance and your reserves are stable. We are not in that position. We have not effected the adjustment.
Is dollarization an option?
No.
And if not, why not?
That's a very complex discussion, Richard. Dollarization is not an option, in my view. I know that some of my colleague economists in other countries, Delisle Warrell most notably, has argued that all of the Caribbean countries should give up their currencies and should all adopt the US dollar. I think that there's some fundamental flaws with that. I was asked by the people in Curacao to come and talk about that because that's an option that they were considering in Curacao. It's not an option, I think, that makes any sense. And I'll tell you, and I'm trying to explain quickly why I think it's not a good option. First of all, the United States dollar is the currency of the United States. It is not our currency. So therefore, we will have absolutely no control over what they do, obviously. We have no control over what they do, but we have no control over what they do. We have no control over the availability of currency in the country. The second thing is that the second problem, which I think Delisle misses in his argument, is that it is not just talking about the availability of currency, that is to say, of notes and coins and so on. It is not that. It is that everything in the country is now denominated in US dollars. The value of your house, the value of your furniture, the value of land, the value of everything is now denominated in US dollars. And so therefore, if somebody wants to say, if I then say to myself that my house in Santa Cruz is worth 300,000 US dollars and I want to sell it, I should be able to get 300,000 US dollars in my hand. You're not going to be able to do that. It's not going to happen. So in my view, dollarization is not an option. That the best option for countries like us is that you keep your currency, but that you run a set of fiscal and monetary policies that maintain stability in your finances, and that you will have growth, so you have investment, and growth and investment does tend to destabilize the economy a little bit, and that is what you pay your central bank governor and your minister of finance and to do, to be able to generate growth while at the same time trying to keep the system as stable and as possible.
How far are we from the possibility of an IMF intervention?
We are a long way from that. But so those people who are talking about we are at the brink of IMF and so on and so forth, we also those people who are talking about the exchange rate should go to 10 to 1 and so on are also, in my view, talking nonsense. The Trinidad and Tobago, yes, our foreign exchange reserves have come down to $5.5 billion. That is true. But it's also the case that we have the Heritage and Stabilization Fund, which is really not part of the official reserves, but it is there. And it is about $6 billion at this point in time. We have another $3 billion US dollars in foreign currency deposits in our local banking system. And we have an untold amount of foreign exchange, which is outside of Trinidad, which is owned by Trinidad and Tobago nationals and residents all over the place, right? There are businessmen who have accounts in China, as we've been allowed to have since 1993. And so therefore, in those circumstances, we are the IMF only comes into play when you are in a position where you have no more foreign exchange reserves. And we are a long way from that. However, the way in which we are operating the system, we are into rationing. And when you are into rationing, what then happens is that distributional issues become salient. People quarrel about I not getting and this one getting and the banks doing this and this, and that is the quarrel that is taking place in the society at this point in time. Sorry?
But go ahead.
Yes, I'm saying the central bank is back squeezing on the amount of foreign exchange that they are injecting into the system. And they are doing that, well, not back squeezing, they're keeping it flat. And they are doing that because the central bank knows as it does its projections down the road, that the amount of inflows that is going to come into the central bank over the course of the next couple of years is going to be either flat or declining. And so therefore it's holding back what it puts into the banking system. The banks for themselves are managing their oversold position. So they are going to reduce credit card limits. They're going to restrict the amount. They're going to manage as best they can who gets how much and so on. And then the effect of that is that people who then want to get foreign exchange will not be able to get it, at least in a timely fashion. And the quarreling and the bickering and the finger pointing is going to continue ad nauseum.
So isn't it basically how they manage the situation with one dealing with the limitations of the credit card, because the banks have no choice, because the levels of credit card purchases will go down because the bank limits will go down, and also the availability of the individual citizen's ability to get cash in hand is also limited. So is that part of the management strategy, either by force or conveniently?
Yes, that is the strategy, because you have no exchange controls anymore. The Exchange Control Act was basically gutted. So there's no surrender requirement. You're not obligated to surrender the foreign exchange that you get. The only thing that is left of the Exchange Control Act is the question of authorized dealers who can buy and sell foreign exchange. And if you go down, as the Guardian reported, you go down Frederick Street, have people outside there buying and selling foreign exchange. And the other thing that is left is that you can't bring currency into the country. There are limits, as you know, from customs and so on. That is all that's left.
Is it creating a dangerous black market situation, or is that just happened not naturally?
It happens naturally, and it's been happening all the time. And it is just now more visible and more. I mean, and there's also a sort of a black market or a gray market that we don't see, right? I mean, you could walk down Frederick Street and as the Guardian reporters have been doing, but there are a set of transactions that are taking place which are sort of in the gray world between businessmen and other businessmen and so on. That is taking place.
The conversation that the Minister of Finance is having with the banking sector, it's in the media today that he's having he's meeting with the banking sector to discuss the foreign exchange issue, and then I think some of the major chambers considering it. Yes. Do you expect that to yield any results beyond what we have discussed this morning?
No, because the banks cannot allow themselves to be put in a position where they are making the decisions about who is getting foreign exchange and who is not getting foreign exchange. In other words, you can't reintroduce exchange control by stealth and let the commercial banks be the people doing that. In the old days, the central bank did it. You wanted to get foreign exchange, you go to you fill out your EC1 form, the central bank approves it, and then you go to your commercial bank, and the commercial bank then sells you the foreign exchange. That's how it worked then. It can't work that way now because we've abandoned exchange controls. So now the only way for it to happen is for the commercial bank to say, well, Richard will get foreign exchange, but Paul will not. The way the banks are doing it now is that, first of all, they say, are you my customer? That's the first thing. So if you are not my customer, I'm not dealing with you. The second thing that they ask is, well, okay, let me look at your situation, right? What is your need? What is your thing? Is it that you're sending a child away to university and so on and so forth? And then based on that, they will then put you in the queue. How much do you want? Because how much you want determines how much availability that they have. They are doing their projections every day and every week as to how much foreign exchange that they will be able to have to sell to the customers, the legitimate customers who come into them. And that's how the system is working.
We have to leave it here for now, but there's something I want to talk about when we talk next, hopefully soon, is your thoughts on the dark economy and how much it's underwriting our legitimate economy, meaning the amount of drugs and passing through the economy and unaccounted for in the legitimate economy. And if you think that's a concern that we should be looking at.
Yeah, okay.
All right, Dr. Farrell, thank you so much. Always a pleasure.
All right, indeed. All right.
Love your clarity.
Very welcome.
All right.
Take care. Cheers.
Economist Dr. Terence Farrell talking to us about the...
He explains things so clearly that you understand exactly what he's saying.
And in ordinary terms, he doesn't have to obfuscate with big words and, and the clarity of his conversation is always appealing. All right. You all have a great day. Alfred is next with the news.
Yep. Have a fantastic day. Remember to smile and laugh. It's great for your health. Don't forget that. Smile and laugh. It's great for health. And of course, according to the CNN report today, don't sit, stand up. I'm going to stand shortly, but
Or make a cake.
I can't stand right now. It might be upsetting.
Cake.
It might be upsetting.
Avril? You see? It's 8 o'clock. We still have to wait for her. Avril, I think the mic is off on the power thing. If you're not hearing yourself, for some reason the mic was turned off. I don't know why.
The fiscal and monetary policy. He said in 2018, gas prices fell shortly, which was structural, so an adjustment was required. Farrell stated if within the changes there was a decision to keep the exchange rate as it was, then there had to be some adjustment to the fiscal and monetary policy. He said interest rates have been kept low, which only encourage people to move their money out of Trinidad. He noted when credit cards are used, commercial banks must figure out where they get the forex to honor those purchases. He explained that the banks have found themselves in a situation where they sell more foreign exchange than they have, and the central bank is not putting the forex as quickly as the banks needed. There will be no devaluation of the Trinidad and Tobago dollar, according to the Prime Minister, Dr. Keith Rowley, as this move could have serious implications for the population. Dr. Rowley maintains the government will not submit to repeated calls for the ruling administration to carry out the move. It was revealed that $2.5 billion is injected by the government into the local economy every year. The final audit report on personnel, equipment, and processes at the Strategic Services Agency is not yet completed. However, several interim reports on the SSA have been submitted to the government. And the government continues to seek help from various bodies in a bid to find out the owner or owners of the tugboat Solo Creed in Angola, which was involved in the oil spill in Tobago, which took place in February this year. The House of Representatives was informed the vessel and those associated with it was operating illegally. Well, that was your update to 8 o'clock. I'm Avril Sintel Bab. Look out for more news in detail at 12 noon.